we recognize this has been a long process, and we really took our time, did a very thorough search, and we really do appreciate everyone's patience and their trust during this really 6-month process. So I know you all are relieved, we're relieved it's over, and we're looking forward to the new chapter. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak a little later, if you don't mind.
I haven't met a superintendent that would pass that up. I'm not going to be the first.
Well, you're not a superintendent yet.
That's right.
So, just a few more minutes. It's been a long time. You can do this. All right. So, we have no visitors wishing to speak and no written communications, so we'll go on to report of special committees. We had a nice advocacy meeting on Saturday, and Ms. Ernst is going to...
Yes, I actually wrote down my thoughts because as I was thinking through what I wanted to say, I got a little impassioned about it, so it'd be best if I just read my my thoughts. So this past Saturday, board members along with Mr. Pigeon, Mr. Davis, Mr. Pinella, and Dr. Frazier attended an advocacy session organized by the Erie County Association of School Boards. The keynote speaker was David Little, who's the executive director of the New York State Rural Schools Association. He's also a lawyer and brought to us his experience as the counsel to the Senate Majority Leader and Director of Government Relations for the New York School Boards Association. Essentially, there's 3 major items that are contributing to the underfunding of our schools in Amherst. There's a formula for foundation aid that gives a smaller share than we should be getting of the education dollars. There's the GEA, which we've talked about in the past, and there is decreased funding of education by Albany in general. The foundation aid figure that was presented to us by the Erie County Association of School Boards was $41.6 million. If the funding formula was more equitable, that is the amount of money that they calculate that we should have gotten from the state over the last several years. The GEA number has risen from last year. Last year at this point we did a similar Saturday, and we came back with a number of 8.5 million. The number they are giving us now stands at 9.6 million. And as Melanie has highlighted, we absolutely need to continue to push for those dollars to be restored. Finally, the governor and the various other leaders in our state have been consistently quoted as saying that they value education. Yet, the percent of the budget that goes to education has declined from 33% to just 27%. And as Dr. Frazier pointed out in his presentation last week, the state is doing very well financially. There is no reason for them to withhold funds from us. Our local taxpayers are being asked to foot more of the education bill, and school districts are being asked to cut spending beyond what is healthy or reasonable. While we in Amherst have done an admirable job of maintaining class sizes and programs, in the next 2 years, by making cuts that were not as painful as they will be in the future, we are facing huge deficits that will begin to impact class sizes and programs. We do not want to continue to increase taxes any more than Amherst residents want to keep increasing what they have to pay. We value education. We expect Albany to do what they say they are doing and give us the money that supports our future. Please visit our advocacy page on amherstschools.org website. We now have a tab right on the front page. It's bright red, and you can click on there and read the various advocacy avenues, including you can sign a petition that the School Boards Association has put together. And as a point of action, each board was asked at the end of the meeting to put forth a resolution to solidify our support for getting the funding we deserve. And we are going to put that into action this evening. So that's our takeaway from our Saturday morning fun. 4 hours we spent really being horrified by what is going on in education funding. We need to do something about it.
Each have a resolution at your place, and again, try to make it personal in relation to Amherst, and again, we will put a cover letter on and send copies of this resolution to Senator Ranzenhofer and Assemblyman Walters, And we also think it's significant, we have to send copies of it to the chairman of the Senate and Assembly Education Committees and the leaders of, majority leaders of both conferences to really make sure they understand the concern that is we're placing on members of their house regarding restoration of education funding. So I think Deb was going to read the resolution, if you're okay. We could.
It will be the addition of item I-1M, and it will read, whereas the Amherst Central School District has had $9,554,711 in gap elimination adjustments held back from their state aid allocation. And whereas the Amherst Central School District has foregone $42,096,655 in foundation aid promised to the school district as a part of the agreement that settled a campaign for fiscal equity funding equity case. And whereas the state of New York has withheld over $8.8 billion in funding for local school districts since 2010-11, from pre-K through grade 12 public education through the gap elimination adjustment. And whereas the state of New York has withheld over $30 billion of aid to local school districts since fiscal year 2008-2009 by failing to fully implement the foundation aid formula. And whereas the New York State Senate and Assembly regularly introduce new mandates for pre-K through grade 12 education without providing the funding to implement those mandates. And whereas school districts across New York State are currently burdened with many existing mandates that limit local flexibility for allocating educational resources. Therefore, be it resolved that the Amherst Central School District Board of Education calls upon the New York State Senate and Assembly to end in its entirety the gap elimination adjustment. And be it further resolved that we call upon the New York State Senate and Assembly to revise the foundation aid formula so it provides each and every district an aid amount that is both fair and equitable.
All right. So we will be voting on that. Thank you. So, do we, it's part of our consent agenda, or do we vote on this?
I think you call for a motion in a second.
Yeah, it's not our consent agenda.
Okay, so, can I have a motion to accept this resolution?
Yeah, I'll make a second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. 6-0, thank you. One other point that the workshop brought up was that advocacy really has to be a round the year thing. We often think about it in terms when it comes to March through April when the budget is finalized. But they talked about needing to be a round the year project, and that's where our advocacy committee comes in. That we have with Sweet Home and Williamsville. I think that's going to be really helpful to kind of keep it in the forefront of people's minds throughout the year. Thank you very much for the people that are on that committee as well. And now we can move on to the superintendent's report.
As scheduled, over here, the Windermere administrators will be addressing the presentation.
Okay, we have to send supporting documentation for
We
you.
are very happy, both Julie and I, to present to you tonight. We are also very aware that there's a big basketball game. So we are going to start and the clock is clicking. You know that we've been asked to present to you about some district initiative, DDI and Aspen. You also know that all the administrators have been asked to talk about some highlights in their building. What you're going to see tonight is a thread throughout all of the presentations you've seen in the past, because we're one district and these are district initiatives. So when Mr. Griesmer talked about data protocol, that's something we're using in all of our buildings. When Smallwood presented the impact of DDI on their classroom instructions, that's something you'll probably see in most of our classrooms. Julie and I wanted to build on those things and also talk tonight about things that have certain initiatives that we want to highlight based on the findings of our DDI. So the first thing, we're just going to give a quick overview of our data teams. Like most of the buildings in the district, we have a building data team and grade level data teams. The building data team consists of administrators, AIS teachers, enrichment teacher, school psychologist. We get together 3 times a year and we look at different data sets, such as our state ed results, Ames Web, how their kids are doing on their literacy profiles. The biggest reason we're getting together, the purpose for this group, is to measure our efficacy. How well are we doing? Are we on the right track? Are there things that we're going to have to adjust? The members of this team then in turn facilitate the grade level team meetings. I think this process is used in other buildings. They meet with the teachers and they have 2 different ways of looking at data. 3 times a year they're looking at the same data sets, state ed, Ames Web, reading levels. And 3 times a year they're getting together with the grade levels and they're looking at work samples. How are our children doing this work? What does their math work look like? How are they approaching it? The purpose of these grade level meetings is a little bit different in that they're collaboratively examining the data and they're really spending time talking about practices that impact the kids' success.
In the fall, each year our building data team comes together annually and we look at the current New York State assessment results and we look at those performances in all areas of math and ELA. So this is just a highlight and summary of some of those observations and interpretations found from our data. Not going to go through every bullet, but in math, we're doing really well. In all subgroup areas, students are outperforming the state. In ELA, this is an area that we want to continue to work on and grow in terms of areas of literacy and integrating them into the content area. And in your yellow folder on the left-hand side is just an overview of our data, which we know that Mr. Pinella had shared with you, so we're not going to get into that. So from these data meetings, though, at these observations, these root cause analysis, and these conclusions, we've gone forward in a response to our data, and this is what we have gone forward with. So we have created our Excellence and Equity Committee, which you're going to hear more about. We've gone on to do some collaborative scoring. We have focused on integrated units in ELA, and we're continuing to build a culturally responsive community. Also, enrichment opportunities, which is so important to focus on the whole child. So, our Excellence and Equity Committee, the question was why excellence and why equity? We strive for success, we know, for all of our students in every subgroup. We know that our students who live in poverty or who have special needs do significantly underperform their other classmates in ELA. And we know that we needed to create a long-term plan to ensure their success. So it's incredibly important to be mindful for us is that we do have a large percentage of our kids living in poverty.
So what we did is we put out an open invitation. Who's going to help us with this? This is a really big initiative. And 24 members came together. They represented teachers, teacher assistants. We had a lot of special education teachers, our social workers involved. We had parents. And we were also lucky enough to have Tony Pinella, Mike Belisle, and Dr. Lane participate in this committee. As a group, we all agreed we are not going to move forward just based on our own experiences. We're going to spend a lot of time reading. We're going to look at research. We're going to learn together. We're going to have a lot of rich discussions. And then we're going to start to plan for some long-term success. And we know for that change to be effective, it couldn't be a quick hit. It had to be something that we were going to be able to sustain. So our goal is to create a 3-year plan. At the same time, we wanted to acknowledge all that Windermere is doing really well. Our teachers, our families, our kids, we have great ingredients in there. But if we are going to affect change, we had to look at what we were doing well, adjust, tweak, and grow. So we did, we read lots of things. We read chapters on called 9099 Schools, about a school that had many kids in poverty and yet were able to attain success. We read things about multicultural perspectives and detracking. And we synthesized our ideas and had lots of discussions. When we came together, we wanted to be very focused. We wanted to identify what is the problem? What problem are we going to try to solve? And it's specifically to address the performance gap that our kids are achieving or are having in ELA. Specifically, how are our kids who are in poverty doing compared to our kids who are not living in poverty? How come there's a gap? How are our special education kids doing compared to our kids who are not identified as special education? How come there's a gap? We wanted to solve that. We wanted to make sure that we could do it in a measurable format, so we developed the SMART goal. So over the course of 3 years, our goal is to close that performance gap by 2% every year. When we were reading, we came up with a lot of statements that weren't action steps, but were more value statements. And there is some information in your packets that describe these values that this committee felt were really important as we move forward. We also brainstormed a lot of action steps, and that handout is also in your packet. What we found was that most of the action steps that were brainstormed fell under 2 objectives. One is, of course, we're going to have to look at our ELA practices. How do we align them through the building? How do we make sure they're authentic? How do we make sure all kids have access to success? The other piece is, how do we continue to build on our culturally responsive environment in our classroom to make sure we're meeting the needs of all the diverse learners? In your packet, you'll also see a format that the plan will be written on. We're going to have 2 committees who are going to address action steps on both of those items.
So the journey has already begun. One of the findings from our Excellence and Equity Committee is on collaboration and how important collaborating together. We have participated in collaborative scoring with all of the teachers on our superintendent's conference day, and the goal is that all teachers walk away with a common understanding of what does proficiency look like and how and ways in which we can support best practices. So you're going to see a short video clip narrated by Chad Mosier walking you through the collaborative scoring process.
Step 1. Teachers were required to bring 3 multi-step math problems that they had selected to score. They each brought an example of student work that they thought was an exemplary 4, a proficient 3, or a below average 2. Scores were not written on the work samples. They were all numbered and then placed into a pile. Step number 2. In the following clip, you'll see how the teachers together reviewed the rubric to ensure a mutual understanding of how to score the problem.
So, what's going to distinguish a 3 from a 4? Maybe they use a level 2 strategy, where a 4 would be a level 3 strategy.
In step 3, no discussion took place. However, teachers individually scored their math problems, writing the scores on an individual tally sheet. In step 4, you will see that a facilitator then gathered everyone's results. In step 5, you will see the groups pick the problem that had the largest discrepancy in scores. They will discuss the problem until they can come to a consensus as to whether the work sample was a 4, a 3, or a 2. This is where professional discussions led to mutual understandings of proficiency across the grade level.
Right, and an answer is missing.
When I was looking these over, I was thinking in my head, okay, I'm looking for the draw, so I'm looking for the picture. I'm looking for the fraction and the dollar amount.
Right.
And if I didn't have those 3 things automatically, I'm thinking it's correct.
At least a 2, right.
At least a 2.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
If the draw was here, it would have been a 2, but because the draw is not there, it's a 4.
That was my thinking.
Agreed?
That would be a no. That's great.
All right, so we're agreeing on that one.
What do you think, Julie?
I see what you're saying. I was looking more at the math of it than I was. I think drawings can be interpreted differently. I don't know if kids necessarily have to draw a picture if the math is there.
I agree with you for sure, but I think because it's in the directions, that's what I was stuck with.
So from that day, the positive feedback was overwhelming from teachers. They found it incredibly valuable, and they had said next year in our DDI meetings, they'd like to go through that collaborative scoring process again using student work. They found it to be incredibly powerful to hear those conversations. So also another area that we wanted to highlight for you on things and ways in which we're connecting to literacy is we're focusing on practices and furthering opportunities to provide for those application of ELA skills in an integrated fashion. We're providing motivating units that integrate social studies and science, but we're also continuing to focus on nonfiction writing, and the content was one of the areas in the 90-90-90 schools research and some other research papers that we have read that found to be very, very valuable for students. Also, end-of-unit projects that provide exciting opportunities to apply the skills and celebrate. And in the intermediate house, teachers in grades 3 through 5 are going to be working with Dr. Lynn Shanahan, a professor at University of Buffalo in the literacy department, working together with those teachers on working on a rigorous, differentiated, balanced literacy approach in ways in which we can improve, knowing that the data suggests literacy is an area of focus for us.
So our district's really lucky. We do a lot of initiatives that go across all buildings. Mike Belisle pulled all the social workers together, as you know, and they came up as part of their character education committee traits that all of our schools are responsible for teaching. One of the ways in which we teach that is on our Monday morning announcements. Chad Mosier, our librarian, is just done a super job of taking technology and working with us to make sure that those character ed traits come alive. At the same time, at these morning announcements, we want to make sure we're also reinforcing literacy. Our WLT had a goal of fluency, so whenever possible, when we're doing any kind of chants, the words are always behind it, and our kids are reading along. As Julie referenced, our kids are involved in really meaningful integrated units. Our second grade teachers worked really hard with their kids studying to fight for with cause, and it's about civil rights. So you'll see a little piece on that morning announcement component here.
And this is how we start our week every Monday.
Until we're public for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Windermere Tigers understand each other, always showing empathy to one another.
My full name is Ruby Neal Bridges Hall. One thing that was hard for me was going to a new school. I really care about children to feel accepted and to get an equal education.
He's a little minion.
That's how he walks out every day.
So those are just snippets that illustrate a little bit of how we start our week and how we reinforce not only character ed, literacy, and really the celebration of our wonderfully diverse school. So what do we do when the kids leave? If our kids really need to be rich in their literacy skills and have opportunities to apply it, it's going to have to go beyond our school day. So we know that that's really important. We've already presented to you in the past about the district-wide Amherst Central Summer Scholars. We continue to find that as a really valuable resource to provide our kids with opportunities for rich language experiences, quality, affordable, and fun. They integrate all the different subject matters. The kids are doing hands-on technology. They're going on really cool field trips, and there's scholarships that are awarded. This was also created to provide free wraparound care, not free, but wraparound care for the free reading program that we work with, UB, to provide our kids who are struggling with reading. In addition to that, Mike Belisle has done a really super job of securing some Title III grants this year, and we now have an after-school program for our kids who are learning the English language. There are 3 6-week sessions, and again, it's a really nice opportunity to integrate subject matter in a really language-rich environment. It's free and it is very fun. One of the things our WLT has talked about and also came up on our Excellence in Equity is how do we provide quality opportunities for kids who don't come to some of our programs. We've reached out to the Boys and Girls Club and we're starting those discussions. How can we work with you? How can we provide professional development opportunities that will benefit our kids as we work with you to provide that after-school care?
Our after-school opportunities, we are thrilled to announce to you that Musical Theater Club is back at Windermere, due in part by an incredibly large donation from a parent. Through his large donation to promote this after-school club, it's provided all the after-school busing, materials, and supplies needed to make this club happen, which we are incredibly in gratitude for. So we're thrilled to announce that that is starting. We're doing 101 Dalmatians. We have 90 kids signed up. You will all be reserved a front row seat to the best production ever. So we're thrilled. Aspen. Aspen is something, as you've heard, we've gotten our feet wet with it. It's an incredible and efficient communication tool between home and school. We used it with attendance, with scheduling, with keeping track of conduct referrals, and we're looking forward to seeing it grow and becoming more and more useful for us as an efficiency tool and also for our teachers.
So we want to thank you guys again for inviting us here to be able to talk about some of the work that our teachers really do a great job with and our parents support us in. We know that this endeavor, striving for excellence and equity for all, is incredibly important. We know we're going to be able to do that through collaboration with all the stakeholders. We know that we really need to focus on literacy. We need to make that better for our kids. We also know that building respectful relationships with everyone who enters our doors is incredibly important. So this really important initiative has to be sustained. And the most powerful tool for sustaining an initiative, we believe, is hope. And at Windermere, hope has a human face. It's the little kiddos who walk through our doors. The most powerful fuel for sustaining an initiative to improve a school is not the desire to raise test scores, but rather the moral imperative that comes with the desire to fulfill the hopes of all those we serve. And we're hoping that we are able to do that for our kids. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for
For this
coming.
opportunity to talk to you.
Any questions?
Any questions? What was our time?
We did a nice
15
job.
minutes.
Will summer scholars continue to be district-wide available to
Yes,
both elementary
plan.
learners?
That is our plan. Nice and fast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
What do you need us done?
Actually, by email, Google, Chrome.
I at least have to do my PowerPoint. I don't know what's doing.
Next up, in just a moment, will be high school principal Greg Pigeon, who will be speaking about options he's researched for how the board might proceed to include student input in it a little bit more in your decision making. Greg's gone to a number of other districts and contacted them. I think he's ready to go.
I am ready to go. I warned everybody in advance, this isn't one of my normal presentations, so it will be brief. So don't head for the exits. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm really grateful that you've taken deep consideration some of the sympathies that some of our students have conveyed to you in terms of their interest in having representation or some type of voice at the board table. So I thank you for that opportunity. What I have put together here for you is basically some information that I compiled from my colleagues across Western New York, the principals, and they shared with me. I was eager to find out what type of models that are out there and what districts have used some form of student representation. There's a number of them out there, and they kind of fall into three broad columns. There is many that have a formal Board of Ed representation of some sort, a student that sits at the board table quite often. There is some models that are more of a board liaison, where a specific student is summoned when student voice is needed on a particular topic. And then we have some, I kind of categorize them as task force models, where you've got a group of students that could be available to either the board president, the board, or the superintendent to meet either on a regular basis or a targeted basis, depending on what the topic is that requires a little student input. Locally, for the more formal representative models, we had Cheektowaga, Pine Valley, Maryvale, Frontier, West Seneca, Niagara, Wheatfield, and Allegheny Limestone self-report to me in terms of the information they had regarding the student reps they have. And I shared from it some information, brief information, roughly about what their model looks like. And Cheektowaga, for example, has a student representative on the board, and it's appointed by first an application process to the board, and then from the applications they put a number of candidates out for a vote. Pine Valley has a
Who votes?
in some of these models that it's mostly the students that would vote for their representation. In Pine Valley, they have a student board of education rep that is selected by the board exclusively, through an application process, and they interview the students. Maryvale has, similar to Cheektowaga, an application and voting process. Frontier had a term they use, ex officio, which basically is a seated board member that is nominated by the student council. And West Seneca had a representative from each of their high schools, because they have two, so they wanted representation by both high schools, and they are selected from the high school. Niagara-Wheatfield had an elected student rep that serves on the Board of Education for 3 years, and Allegheny Limestone had a student BOE rep selected again by an application and an interview, and they're interviewed, in this case, administrators interview and select the student. Turning the page, we've got some liaison models, or at least one. Alden has had a student council / Congress representative report directly to the Board of Ed on a monthly basis at a board meeting. So he or she would come regularly to a board meeting and deliver a student council report to the board. Grand Island, and going into the column of kind of task force models, Grand Island had a superintendent's advisory group that was composed of 20 students that was selected annually. The superintendent would interact with those students. Akron was in the formative stages of a similar type advisory group. Lancaster had an organization called the Superintendents and Students Advisory Council that consisted of student leaders from the high school and middle school that meet with the superintendent. That was some interesting information. It was nice that they had some middle school representation. And they meet regularly, monthly, with the superintendent. What I wanted to make you aware of, I'm sure you're ad hoc aware of many different leadership groups we have at the high school. So fortunately, we have a lot of leaders available to us that bring to the table a lot of skills, and students that have chosen to be leaders of their peers. So I thought I'd list a few of those as you're considering how you might go about getting more student voice. Here is a menu of great leaders available to you. You have all of your elected class officers, and the nice thing about that is they have been, through a vote, seen and recognized as leaders and peers, so that you know that those candidates are vetted in some manner. Student Council similarly has 4 elective leadership positions, as well as an executive board that has many student active leaders on that. Our Pathfinders, who you know very well, they come and visit us every other month for our Student of the Month and Teacher of the Month presentation. And they're peer leaders and mentors. They're selected through a fairly rigorous application and interview process. And we have some 50 Pathfinders available to you. They're currently serving you as a subcommittee structure, and they choose our Student and Teacher of the Month. So they are accustomed to visiting you and somewhat understanding of the board processes and some of the business we do here. We have on our high school BLT 2 student representatives. They serve 2-year terms. So these are students that are very well versed in a lot of the business that we do at the leadership table with teachers, paraprofessionals, and administration. And they're accustomed to and have delved into instructional matters, school climate matters, data. So these are some students that really have had some excellent experiences in terms of some of the business of education that the average student maybe wouldn't pay attention to. The BLT reps would be a good source of great information for you. We have our CIA, which is our Covenant in Action, and that is a student leadership group that represents the cultural well-being of our building, and they really look at the culturally responsive teaching and do a number of activities to make sure that we're representing all of our students in making sure that we have really diverse activities and that all students in our building have the voice. So that's a nice group of students. We also, kind of on the athletic side, you've got a leadership group in Varsity Council, and they're an extracurricular club that promotes all matters athletic. So if there's an item of interest that has an athletic or wellness flavor, it would be a great group of vetted athletes that lead that program. And Varsity Council has 4 elected leadership positions. And for some reason, I'm missing an item here, but I did add, at least at one point I had it on, was going to the model where there was some middle school representation. The middle school has a number of leadership models as well. They have their web team, which is equivalent to our Pathfinder, and those are selected, trained students that work on a number of initiatives in the building, as well as their elected officers, and they also have a student council. So you have a lot of parallel leadership groups in the middle school, should you need a middle school voice available to you. So I was happy to put this together, and it was a great opportunity for me to learn more about the wonderful models that are out there, and I know that our students, when called upon, are eager to add their voice to many different issues. So as you deliberate and think about how you could garner more student voice when you need it, or at the board table, here's some items to think about. So that's what I had put together for you, and if you had any questions, you're welcome to entertain those.
Did you have any questions?
How much overlap is there? I mean, I know there's 50 Pathfinders, so that's kind of a big group, but it seems like the student council is probably, how many people are on the student council apart from the 4 elected leaders?
The executive board is probably around a dozen active students on that. So you've got as many as, rough numbers, 20 active leaders, and then a number of students that get involved in any particular activity. It's kind of the workforce for the student council. So, but formally, you've got the 4 elected officers and about a dozen executive board members.
So just from your opinion, do you get a good cross-section from this, or are there pockets that are maybe missing?
Just student council or across the board?
Across the board.
Across the board, Pathfinders certainly. In fact, that's one of our goals in selecting annually, is that we've got a broad base of students representing really a good cross-section of our schools. So certainly in Pathfinders and in student council, as well as BLT. CIA is, because it's a cultural leadership group, that is a group that is represented heavily by African Americans, because that is the nature of the group, to promote cultural items in that regard, so that you have a special subgroup there in CIA. That's why I listed them, because they add a lot of voice to those matters cultural in our building. And Varsity Council, extremely diverse as well. They have a lot of active membership as well as their leaders. Thank you very much, and if you need any more information, I'd be happy to chase it down for you.
Thank you. Great information. Thank you very much.
So then the next step is for us to continue discussing this at some point?
I think given the fact that we now have a new district leader, that maybe it would be a good time, and we have a little less on our plates, maybe this is a good time to kind of regroup and work with Mr. Piniella to see how his thoughts interface with what we would like for the board. Does that sound like a plan?
Final.
Plan in place by the end of the school year? The timeline, hopefully have a plan together by the end of the school year?
One of the reasons why this was brought to today was because I think some of us were trying to decide whether it made sense to put on a referendum for a vote the idea of having a non-voting student member of the board. And I think maybe given people can decide what they want to do, but it seems like there's many other models that we could choose from as well. And plus the fact that we have a new superintendent, maybe it's not the time to make a decision to put that on for a referendum for this year's vote, and give ourselves the next 6 months to work with Mr. Pinella and decide maybe what direction we want. Obviously,
there's no rush for judgment here.
right, obviously the students want to have more voice, and I think it would be really helpful for us, but the question is how do we do that? And perhaps given this information, rushing to put it to a vote may not make sense right now.
And the final part of the superintendent's presentation, I think will be a brief update on the budget. Not much has changed.
Yes, it's going to be very brief tonight. There really has been no changes since the last budget or board meeting last week. So I'm just going to run through the numbers really quickly. I'm not going to go into much detail about the revenues themselves. You can see the breakdown here, our actual current year projected, and then the next 2 years out. Those remain unchanged since last week. On the expenditure side of things, same thing. Everything remains unchanged from last week. Couple things here, we're looking at our personnel for 16-17, given some retirements that we're becoming aware of. We're looking at things on the personnel side. And BOCES, we're finalizing that. BOCES is going to be closing down the system here in the next couple weeks and fine-tuning some of their costs based on enrollments and needs of the districts. And we'll have a better idea of that in the next couple weeks, I'm sure. So as of now, our revenues and expenditures remain unchanged since last week. Where we sit currently is right here for 16-17. A $441,000 budget gap. Again, these numbers do not include any type of appropriated fund balance or reserves from the board. We're hopeful we will get the remaining $500,000 of gap elimination. So we may have a balanced budget hopefully here. What we need to focus on though clearly is 17-18 and 18-19. We have 7-figure budget gaps here pending, looming. And whatever we can do, in 16-17, it'll carry forward in 17-18 and 18-19, obviously. The gaps are mainly due to, you can see here, we're getting a 1-year bubble of building aid in 16-17, and our increasing personnel costs are really making these structural deficits going forward. So as we sit right now for 16-17, as I said, we're hopeful, and we need to really start focusing then on these 2 later years. And they are projections at this time, but nonetheless, we still have to pay attention to them and really focus on those. So at this point, I will take any questions. I'm sorry to disappoint everyone with a short budget presentation on such a big night.
On time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, excuse me. Do I have someone who would like to make a motion for new business items?
I will make a motion for new business items I-1A through M. We added M, correct?
We already did it.
Because it was a separate resolution.
Got it. Sorry about that, all right. New business items I-1A through L and 2A through K, A being Mr. Anthony Pinella, Superintendent of Schools.
Okay, we're almost there.
The girls are being very patient.
I know. Very good. Anyone second please? Any discussion? All right. All those in favor of new business items I-1A through L and I-2A through K, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, now it is official.
First, I'd like to thank Dr. Chavy for her service to the district. I know she couldn't be here tonight, but to serve for almost 9 years in one district is a great accomplishment. I'd also like to thank Dr. Frazier for coming in about a month ago and accelerating our budget development process and hitting the ground running to, as he puts it, clear the path for the new superintendent. I'm honored to share this with my support network here, and I'm thrilled to be the next superintendent of schools here in Amherst. The board deserves a lot of kudos. When you sign up to be a board member, you know you sign up for long hours, you know you sign up for some heartache and some headaches, and certainly with what they've had to face with budgets over the last few years, they haven't been in the positions that previous boards have been in, where you're able to add programs and see them through. They've been faced with having to reduce costs and contain them with the factors that Jean outlined so well. But most board members don't sign up thinking that they're going to hire a new superintendent. But they are told when they do that it's the most important thing that they'll ever do. And I think looking at the folks here, they've done a wonderful job. They've committed numerous hours, taken that away from their families and their day jobs to make sure that this school district has the best person in the position of leadership to make sure that the student outcomes continue to improve. So I want to thank them publicly for all their hard work over the last 6 months since September and the search that they've conducted with Dr. Vince Capola from the Western New York Ed Service Council. 11 years ago, I walked out of this school district as a social studies teacher in the middle school, and as I was packing up my things, one of my colleagues said to me, are you excited to be an assistant principal in another district and an administrator? And I said, I'm absolutely excited. And he said, well, where do you think your career's going? And I said, to be honest with you, my dream would be to come back here someday and be superintendent of schools. So I'm very honored to stand here before you, fulfilling that dream, and I look forward to collaborating with all of the stakeholders that are represented here to make sure that this district remains one of the elite districts in Western New York, and that our students end up achieving and leaving with all of the tools they need to be successful after they walk out of our high school. So, thank you.
Do we have any follow-up action items?
I do not have any.
Good deal. All right, well with that, make a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Go Tigers.